Hi, everybody. It's Paul Kelly. I've been a teaching professional now for close to 35 years. I've done over 10,000 lessons, and I want to talk to you about the number one thing that I see that prohibits students and golfers
Perfect.
from making a change and then sticking with that change. So I'm going to use a couple examples. I'm going to show you how I get around that with the student. I hope you find this helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of swings. I'm going to use the example of a standard slice. This is the one that we see the most often. Over the top, open club face. And then I'm going to talk to you about how I approach that with the student and how I have really good success with students making their change in their pattern of their movement and sticking with it so that they get it down and they don't abandon it and move on to something else. All right. Over the top, outside in, open club face. And there we go. We see that all day long as instructors. Over the top, open club face. So then I'll bring them over to the screen and I'll show them the data because the data doesn't lie and the data doesn't have opinions. All right, so if we focus on the middle screen of the club video actually coming in, we can see the path. That blue line approaching the ball is the club path. The yellow line up and down vertically is the club face. And then we can see on the bottom is that we have a swing path of 5.5 degrees outside in and a club face of 4 degrees open. Now that gives us a face to path of 10.3. And as I talk to them about this, I want them to understand it. So I talk to them and I explain, your face controls the initial direction. Your swing path controls most of the curvature. So your face sends it, your swing bends it. Do we have that? And they'll say yes. I say, okay, so we're going to work on changing your swing path first. Nothing else. We're changing the pattern of outside in to inside out. And I'll ask them, does that sound like a good place to start? And they'll say, sure. I want them to buy into it. I want them to own the change. So then we say, okay, I'm going to take an alignment stick and I'm going to lay it down so that it's severely pointing off to the right. We are making a pattern change. We're not interested in anything else except for changing that pattern right now because we've got some building blocks to carry on. So now I'm going to say, I want you to swing and follow that stick with your path. And they'll say, okay. And I'll say, how was that? And they say, well, that's no better than before because the ball is still slicing. And this is where the key comes in, is that most people, when they make a change, they will equate the success of that change with the ball flight. Now, we were going in to change a pattern. Did we change the pattern? Well, let's have a look. Now, once again, I stressed, we did this in an extreme version because we wanted to see them make a pattern change. Look at the difference in that video of that club coming at the ball from inside. So that's coming at the ball from almost 14 degrees inside, which I stress is exaggerated. We're not going to stay there, but we came at it from the inside. It was a pattern change. Was the club face still open? Yes. Did the ball go to the right? Absolutely. So we made a pattern change. We did not see the ball flight we wanted. And this is where most people go wrong. They see that and they go, well, that's no better than it was, and it feels uncomfortable. So I'll go back to the way I did it because if I'm going to produce the same flight, why not do it on my own terms? And they abandon the good beginning of a pattern change that they made. Now, if I make a pattern change and I don't see the ball flight I want, it's because there is another pattern change that has to come after it, and that would be club face. And we're not dealing with club face here. We're dealing with swing path. So started outside in, now gets the feeling of inside out. And I want that student to stay with that and just hit balls and have them all go over to the right each time they look down the line and they go back to the data. They look at it. I am 10 degrees inside out on that. I'm watching my club on the video come through. And every single time they make a shot, I bring them back to the screen and I want them to see the data. I want them to get success in their head that I'm making a pattern change. And each time they make a swing and they create the pattern that I'm looking for, which right now is inside out, and it's excessively inside out because I want them to move away from their standard comfortable pattern. We'll deal with it, shortening it up a little bit later. We're moving away from it. So I see them make their swing. Go back to the data again. Look, you were inside out. Is that the change we wanted to make? And they say, yes. I say, that's what we agreed that we were going to do today. We're going to change your pattern. Is the ball flight important? And sometimes they'll still say yes. And I have to remind them that it is not important because we're making a change to a movement, and another change to another movement will come later, which will tie these together, and that will give us our ball flight. But we have to do one and then move on and do the other one. And I want them to get comfortable with it so that it's natural and easy to do, so that when we do introduce that second pattern, there's not two things in their head going on. So we have brought them from this to this by not focusing on the ball flight. By not focusing on the ball flight, they can feel comfortable grooving it over there. Because what I've found with people is that as soon as they see that go over there, they want to manipulate something else to fight it. And when they do that, they ruin their pattern that they're working on. And that's my experience in 35 years, is that people will equate the success of their movement or their drill with the ball flight, and that makes them move away from the success of the drill, and it gets them to abandon it because they don't see the ball flight instantly that they want, even though they were creating good patterns and good movements. They quit it. If you're working on a pattern, work on the pattern only. Move on to the next pattern. And each time we keep focusing and reinforcing the fact that we are working on this measurable pattern that we can see success. The ball flight is not important at this point. Thanks again for watching. I'm Paul Kelly.
Great job, Paul.
Thank you. So what I found is that if you take one thing and get it conquered, they'll buy into conquering the next thing. And as long as they understand where we're going, long term and short term, most people will buy into it. And I find that I have very, very good success in keeping people on the track when I keep focusing on their successes of this is what's going on, and explaining the process, explaining that, we're going to do swing path first, or we're going to do club face first, whatever is best for that particular student. And that's all we're going to work on, and go from there. We could take an example of, say, somebody who is unable to get the ball up in the air. They're hitting line drives and no spin and no height. If you go through the data with them and you point out all the things that are there that are hindering that, such as, low dynamic loft, high angle of attack, outside in swing path that traps the ball, all those things. And you say, look, all these are contributing to them, but if we fix this one, this is how it affects the next one after it. So we'll fix this one first, and we can move off and go on. And it gets them into immediate tasks rather than when's it all going to happen. They just see it. And for me, it works really well. I have good success with it.
Paul, how do you keep them from wanting to be full speed on everything, right? Like, I'm sure when you're making those changes, they're like, well, they just can't go slow enough.
Well, we all have that. I always make speed one of the patterns or one of the modules that we're going to do. And if they can do the task at full speed, I leave them there. But we all know that most people can't. So I have to bring them back. And, that leads into another thing that, we've covered before, which is people's illusion of tempo and speed is out of whack. You can get them to slow their tempo down and keep the same club head speed, and they get confused about it sometimes. But yeah, it's just like, okay, we're task oriented. We're not object oriented. We're not trying to produce the ball flight. That's just the main important thing to me.
Perfect. Any other feedback, comments?
So I will just say that you touch upon the basis of solid communication, right? So you have to communicate to the student the why you are doing what you're doing so that they can understand it clearly. You explain it well, and they trust you. They trust you fully so they can commit to making the change. So it goes back to, my best subject when I was in primary school, and it was called show and tell. Right? You'd show them and tell them, and then you'd show them and tell them again, and show them and tell them a different way, right? Till the cows came home, and then everybody was happy, and you went to bed.
Yeah,
So
Jeff,
communication is such a key point. And if you do a really good job, like you do, Paul, in explaining the whys and the whens, not to mention the hows, um, you will have success.
I find that, yeah, the people have to understand, and I tell everybody, every single student at the beginning, is that I want you to understand what you're doing, and I want you to question this. I don't want you to do it because you paid me to tell you. It has to make sense to you.
Right.
It can't just be because I told you, because when things go wrong, the I told you will get abandoned. But if you understand it and know where it came from yourself, you're more likely to stay with it.
And I think that's part of the problem is people pay us to tell them, and they're not um, wanting to explore or to experiment or to try something new by going extremely inside out, just so that they can start to develop, something that's really hard for us to teach is feel.
Mhm.
But there's no way they can feel those until they do those true exaggerations.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if I can add something, a great presentation, Paul. By the way, that's a great segment, and I'm pretty sure you
Thank you.
have tons of those. One key thing that we always rely back is too many information at once is is pretty much like might as well just not teach anything, because for me maybe it's easy to understand all those elements at once, but for somebody who comes to a lesson for the first time, for the second time, if there's too many information at once, they're getting lost, and this is when they're not going to come back and see you.
Absolutely.
Great job, Paul.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
doing that. Taking the time and filming that. That was awesome.
If anybody ever needs to revisit that, it's on my YouTube channel, which is Paul Kelly Golf.
Yeah, it's worth following too. And Paul usually shares it on Facebook, so you can follow him there on Facebook too.